This is WFIU in Bloomington, Indiana. This is music for the Fingerboard, and we are here with Josef Gingold, who is treating us to some historical violin recordings of his collection. What's happening?
Well, how did you like the Sarasate?
I loved it. I was wondering also what they were saying. They gave us a little hint of that very famous kind of hearts and flowers kind of
I don't
melody.
know. It's too bad that section has been deleted. Well, apparently he himself deleted it. But the facility and the playing is, to me, even astonishing in this day of great technique.
I was going to ask you if there are any people today who are comparable.
Well, Heifetz is comparable to anybody at any time. When I think of Heifetz, to me, well, I was going to save it for later on, but since you ask, to me, Heifetz is what Paganini must have been in the other centuries.
Mm-hmm.
His perfection and his playing has set a standard which I think has benefited all of us. The orchestra musician, the quartet player, the soloist, the teacher, we all aimed towards achieving the standard which he set. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And speaking about Heifetz, let's for a moment turn to Heifitz's teacher, Leopold Auer. Leopold Auer was Hungarian by birth, born in 1845 and died in 1920. Long life, 85 years. He, too, was a prodigy and came to Budapest as a child, and then studied in Vienna. And as a young boy of 15, after much traveling with his father, trying to earn a few dollars, or whatever the monetary unit was at the time, in the countries where he concertized, simply to further his education, he went to Joachim, who was then court violinist to the King of Hanover. He studied with Joachim for 2 or 3 years, and then set out as a concert artist and eventually became concertmaster in Hamburg. And in 1868, he succeeded Wieniawski as professor of the conservatory in St. Petersburg, a position that he held for 49 years. Now, we only think of him as the great teacher of Misha Elman, of Jascha Heifetz, Tosha Seidel, and so many great violinists. But his background was more than that of a pedagogue. He was a wonderful violinist to begin with as a soloist. He was an excellent quartet player. He also played in a trio for many years with Anton Rubinstein and the famous cellist Charles Davidoff. And he was a first-rate conductor. He conducted the Russian Musical Society, which was the first orchestra in Russia at the time, for a period of 5 years. Conducted the first performance in Russia of the Berlioz Requiem, and brought out the works of all the neo-Russian composers, encouraged them, read their chamber music. I'm speaking of Tchaikovsky, Arensky, Rimsky-Korsakov, Glazunov. And as you know, the first violin composition that Tchaikovsky ever wrote, the Serenade Melancholique, was dedicated to Auer. Eventually, Tchaikovsky dedicated his violin concerto to him, and Auer felt that the work needed some revisions. There were parts which he thought were not well written for the instrument. So he begged Tchaikovsky to leave the work with him, and that he would work on these revisions and show it to Tchaikovsky. However, Jurgensen, the Tchaikovsky's publisher in Moscow, decided to publish the work in its original form, which he did, and Tchaikovsky was rather hurt that Auer didn't produce the work sooner, and another violinist by the name of Adolf Brodsky happened to find a copy of it in Vienna and gave the first performance of it. And in gratitude, Tchaikovsky rededicated the work to Adolf Brodsky.
Brodsky found it satisfactory as it was
He
written.
played as it was written, and incidentally, it is now again being played exactly in the original version. The Auer version is today unacceptable for some reason.
Have you seen it?
Oh yes, I studied it, and this is the version that I was brought up on because I was a student of Auer's. You see, now he was a great teacher. I have heard criticism leveled, and I've read that he lived in a country where violin talent was growing on trees, and that he had the choice of the greatest, the cream of the crop, so to speak. Well, perhaps, but where there's smoke, there's fire. And when I was 14 years old, living in New York, I had the good fortune to have played for Auer 3 times. And those 3 lessons that I had are still engraved in my memory, because I came away with something from each one of those lessons that has been incorporated into my own playing, which I can still pass on to my students today. So there was something to the man.
Tell us a little something about our
Well,
teaching.
I cannot really speak too much as a teacher because my time with him was very short. But I'll describe Auer to you. He was small in stature. I don't think he was more than 5 feet 2 or 3 inches tall. He was completely bald. He had a little beard, and his eyes were like charcoal black, and he was myopic. And so when he wanted to speak to you, he would come very slowly, look, and come close to you and actually rub noses. And when I saw him approach me, I got so frightened. I could hardly hold my bow in my hand. I didn't know what was happening next. But I had an extraordinary experience with the professor, which showed me the kind of a teacher that he was. I think he was a hypnotist in a way. He would take a chance and try to get the most that he could out of a student. I was playing something for him which demanded a very rapid up-bow and down-bow staccato, which at that time I couldn't do at all. I played apparently everything else in this particular concerto quite well. He seemed pleased, but he hit the weak spot immediately. And he came over to me, as I explained to you, and he said, "Why don't you have a staccato?" And I said, "Professor, I don't know how to make one." So he said, "Now, put the bow down on the string, make your muscle tight, upper muscle very tight." And I did, and he felt it. He said, "No, tighter, tighter. Now put the bow down." And then he began to bang his feet. He said, "Play!" My bow went, and you know, immediately I got this very quick staccato, which I can do to this day. and it was magic.
Do you use the same method with your students?
I tried. It's it doesn't work quite as well, but I eventually they get it. With me, it happened immediately. Another time, I came a little earlier for the lesson, and there was a girl playing the Bruch, G minor, in the last movement. This girl's name was Anita. Now, I don't know her last name. I don't know. I have not seen Anita before, and I haven't seen her since. But Anita played yam ta la ta ta yam ta dam ta ta yam ta 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 ta. And Auer stopped. I said, Anita, play with temperament. And again Anita played ta dam ta da da. And he stopped. He says, Anita, a violinist who has no temperament is no violinist. Play with temperament. And this girl just didn't have it. She tried again, and then he picked up his violin. And he played. He gave so much of himself. He was then 82 years old. And the bow hairs were flying all over the place, and he was scratching. But the character of the piece, he hit it right on the head. And I was watching him, and at that time I was so young, I didn't realize that his face got so red, but so did his bald head. And he was a ball of fire, and I got so frightened. I told my mother, who was with me, I said, I think he's going to die. She said, don't worry, he's all right. And he was completely spent after this illustration. He put his violin down. Anita resumed playing. You know, James, this was a great lesson for me, because I saw, regardless of an untalented student, he did his best at his age. He gave all his heart and soul. It didn't work that time, but nevertheless, he was a teacher. He did his duty. And this was Leopold Auer. Of course, his career as a teacher is legendary. I mean, I think he'll go down as perhaps the greatest teacher of all time. Now, the recording we're going to hear is very interesting. The pieces that this Hungarian dance number 1 that he plays is that and the melody of Tchaikovsky, the only 2 recordings that he has ever made. And that was made in June of 1920 on his 75th birthday. It was a private recording which Victor did, and he, with the understanding that it was not to be commercially released, he made a few copies which he gave to his students. And that was his present to his students. And this is the recording. Of course, somebody got a hold of it, and thank God for that, because the Hungarian dance, to me, the way he plays it is just remarkable. So excuse me for gabbing so much, but I just get so lost in the excitement. Oh, God.